School days.
Ta-da.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
everybody. How's everybody tonight?
Doing okay, thank you. How are you?
Good. You want me to take my shoes off or no?
It's up to you. However you feel comfortable.
No matter where I sit?
Sit down wherever you feel comfortable.
So your other plans?
Jack, a
fell
little
through?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, the
Does she
weather.
have plans too? You have plans also? Canceled on me. Yeah, we had plans.
I'm actually glad.
Well, I'm glad. Glad you could be here. I do.
Ready? Ready.
Oh, that way, you know, you haven't done that in a while.
I hope I don't cough the whole time.
You have a cough?
I'm at the very end of a cold. I don't think I have it in a cold anymore. It was 2 weeks.
So it's post-nasal drip.
No, it's just it's cold. But I'm wearing Invisalign again. And so
Oh.
I don't wanna stuck a thing, cause then all that will get stuck underneath and.
Yeah. You okay?
Yeah, I just needed to
You're breathing heavy.
went up the steps, I went down the steps, I went up the steps, I went down the steps. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Get your steps in.
You know, your mask looks like a platypus.
I am a platypus.
The platypus was mentioned during the holidays.
What?
Somebody was mentioning something about the platypus. Somebody was talking out loud, making a speech, sermon, whatever. Could have been you. Could have been Emily. I don't remember who it was, but mentioned about it like it's not logical how it's been put together, like a platypus.
Interesting, I missed that.
The stuff that I remember.
There was a comment like, I'm vaguely remembering like your question. Oh, I know what it was. Somebody was talking about intelligent design,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right? And then they said, and if you question intelligent design, just take a look at the platypus.
yes.
Yeah.
That's so platypus comes in again.
Ah,
That was Mark Blackwell who rang the bell, because his name is right there.
it says
Oh,
Mark
how you doing?
Blackwell.
Hi,
Really? Yeah.
let's do it.
Hi, Mark.
That was the grandson on the phone.
My grandson.
Yeah, he
Which
wants
one?
to come early so you can give him a Hebrew lesson.
Yes.
Come last week, so we're behind you.
We're behind. So my youngest grandson, Linda would say the younger, but that's only if I'm comparing him to the elder. Which I'm not. I'm saying he is absolutely the youngest of all of them.
Okay, and he wants you to come over early.
He wants to learn to speak Hebrew.
Oh,
You want to know why he wants to learn to speak Hebrew?
Why?
okay, tell me.
So he'll know what his parents are saying.
Oh.
That's
a good reason.
That's a very good reason.
Okay, Becca wanted to learn to speak Hebrew. She wanted to go and live in Israel. So she would learn to speak Hebrew, so she wouldn't have to take a language in high school. Guess what?
You have to take a language anyway.
Well, I didn't have anybody that could give her the Hebrew test.
Yeah. I had dreams of taking Yiddish. And I had to take Spanish in high school.
Yeah, that's what she
But-
said.
But it didn't work in high school,
Yeah,
but it got her 4 credits in college.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
good.
That is good.
credits.
It gave her 9 credits,
9 credits, she tested into 4th level,
right?
so they gave her 3 credits for each level that she.
Well,
tested
that's
out.
right. I was
Oh,
thinking
wow.
courses.
And plus- and with her AP, so she graduated with Mr. Earl.
So,
Wow.
so while it didn't work, while the plan didn't work for high school, it worked really well in college.
which is better because you're paying for that.
Yeah. And it allowed her to get a Jewish studies certificate
Oh.
with, you know, a lot less work. So,
He also said that if you want to bring a deck of cards, if you want to play cards, then you need to bring a deck of cards because he doesn't know where his cards
Do you have a deck of cards?
we've got a drawer full of decks of cards.
I got a box full. Susan used to go traveling, used to bring home a deck of cards from different places.
Ah,
And it's like, seriously, we probably have about 20 to 30 packs of cards.
goodness.
And 98% of them aren't even open, you know, so.
I think all ours are open.
So, Rick,
What do you want to wait, start now? or-
I think Kohaleb time is probably 7 o'clock.
Well, it's 5 o'clock, it's 5 after.
That's 7
Is
o'clock.
Susan,
Kohaleb time.
is Susan planning to
Susan,
come?
I am the representative.
Oh,
Susan
okay.
is dead tired.
Okay.
She's
dead.
probably sleeping or napping.
Okay.
Oh, does anybody want a 2022 calendar?
23.
2023?
I have one already, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So many more years.
I use it, yeah. I actually have carrot too. I don't do the electronic thing on the phone. I don't know how to use it. So I have one on the table for our calendar, and then I have one in my bag for work. Yeah. Nothing
What
like paper,
hospital do you work in?
university.
Do you know David Smith?
No,
You're a radiologist, right?
I'm not a doctor. I'm a radiographer.
Radiographer.
Yeah.
That's what he was before he retired and he got sick.
Oh, sorry. Is he okay?
He's he survived a serious cancer.
Oh,
So,
I'm glad he survived.
yeah.
No,
Hey, Gene.
radiographer is the person who takes the pictures.
I am a photographer, except I use X-ray, so it's radiographer. I take the pictures.
The
Yes.
radiologist reads the pictures.
Radiologist reads the pictures. I know how the X-ray tube works. I can take it apart, not physically,
Yeah.
and I can tell you how they convert electricity to X-ray and electricity into television and stuff like that. That's physics. That was my favorite part of I actually asked my teacher if I can come back and teach that.
Ooh.
Yeah, but we had a little fight, so I didn't even bother.
Oh.
But she still offered me, but I said, no,
I
helping
work for you.
not helping you. So,
Okay, well, we started, if somebody comes in, I'll double on back, So obviously it's, it's an intimate group here, so we should all feel like it's a conversation, right? Is it on record? Steve?
It is on record.
Very good, okay.
It's been recording Stuart's life story. Judy coming in.
We have a lot more people here. I parked way back there thinking, there'll be.
Oh, okay, see, wait a minute, and here it comes, all right.
hey there, Clara.
So I start with the Yiddish greeting of Hashem Dank. So it's thank you for coming. And thanks to the Silverns for being such good hosts for Sukkot. And we still have a few more times to go with that, and I appreciate that. And they've helped to elevate Sukkot to a new level, within Kohaleb, and I'm happy to see that. We're gradually, we're gradually beginning to fill in, so we're filling in these holidays. So, would somebody let me, and it's what time is it out here?
What?
What time is it?
I've got, it's about seven.
Is that my phone?
My phone says 7:08.
Okay, so how about, could somebody let me know when we have 15 minutes to go?
So what's that, 7:45?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from that point, we'll just completely open it up up until then, I have a fair amount of stuff I want to cover. So the topic for this evening is, first be a mensch, right? So, we, those of us who've grown up, I guess, 50, 60, I don't know, 70s, maybe, whatever, that's about the limit, probably, I don't know about your background, but, probably have heard the term mensch, actually, growing up, I didn't hear a lot of Yiddish, but mainly the put down words, of which there's a lot. There are many put down terms in Yiddish, and only after a while did I begin to hear about mensch. Like, whoa, there's actually some positive word in Yiddish for talking about that. Although it's usually said like, somebody's doing something, bad or not quite cool. You say, be a mensch, right? So it wasn't exactly in a positive way, but it's still a positive term. So it's 1960, and the movie is The Apartment. And are you all familiar with that movie, The Apartment? Would you?
I was seven.
Huh?
I was 7.
It's on all the time though.
Yeah, I've
Exactly.
seen it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it was written and directed by Austrian Jewish refugee Billy Wilder, who went on to do a number of really great movies. It stars Jack Lemmon.
Sorry. Wow. Alan, they're going. Sorry.
Okay, it starred Jack Lemmon as kind of a schlub, a doormat, working in a large corporation, and he's trying to work his way up by allowing his superiors to use his apartment for trysts. They're married men that are using his apartment for trysts, with probably a lot of it with company employees. So Jack Lemmon has an interest, a romantic interest in the elevator girl, who's played by Shirley MacLaine. So that ages it already, man. Like elevator girl, right? Like elevator people. Like, when was the last time anybody saw that? But that she played the elevator girl, a very young Shirley MacLaine, and she's having an affair with the head of personnel, played by Fred McMurray, right? Who
My 3 sons.
right, and
Yeah, but
a
he's
lot of
so
Disney
bad.
movies, but earlier in her career, he did some really good dramatic parts. And so there, Fred McMurray and Shirley MacLaine are they're doing their number at Jack Lemmon's apartment. Okay. So he leaves the apartment to let them use it. And then he returns one day and he finds that Shirley MacLaine has overdosed. Okay. Fred McMurray has dumped her and she's overdosed, trying to commit suicide. So he contacts the doctor who lives in the building, Dr. Dreyfus, who's played by a very fine character actor named Jack Kruschet, who's aware of what's been going on, and or that something's going on. I don't know exactly what it is. And he says with his somewhat Yiddish accent to Jack Lemmon, be a mensch. Right, be a mensch, or the Yiddish is see a mensch, but they don't use that. So that was probably the first time I've ever seen it in a movie. I'm not sure I've ever heard the word mensch in a movie before, or in TV or anything like that.
Does this movie take place in New
Huh?
York? Does this movie take place?
I'm
in
not
New
sure.
York?
It's
Right.
probably, yeah. So let's just take the phrase, be a mensch. And let's see, how do you respond to that? What are some of your reactions to that? Just the phrase.
What you mean, are you asking what we think it means, or what do you mean?
Well, you could say that, but just, what's your gut level response? Is it be a mensch? What's your gut level response to what that means?
Be a decent person, be a, like, do the right thing,
You know what, sir?
do the right thing,
Do the right thing.
the right thing.
Be an
the right thing.
upstander.
Yeah.
Be an upstander.
High standards. Okay. Anybody else?
Step up.
Huh?
Step up.
Step up. Okay.
Have integrity.
Integrity. Okay.
And it's
So,
kind of,
yeah, go ahead.
well, it's kind of, I mean, I just realized, it's kind of assuming that the person knows what that means. It's like, be the self you know better, do it.
Mhm,
Like that
better.
was, yeah, be your best self. Yeah. Which could be quite an assumption, because, people,
Mhm,
but.
mhm. Or at least do something decent, right? The idea of decency, which.
Is a mensch good for man and woman? Is it?
Well, I think, for most of my life, I've heard it used for men, but I think everything's becoming non-gendered
But this
now.
is 1960.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, and then it was used for men. I
Yeah.
don't think I ever heard it used about a woman. And I'm not sure I've heard about it used, I'm not sure it's used about a woman even now, is it? Is it, it is, okay. So things are becoming, ungendered or whatever, I'm not sure what the right word there is. So if the word comes from German, it meant, and it just means person.
Human.
Okay. Mhm. In Yiddish, it begins to have the meaning of somebody who's an upstanding person, someone worthy of respect. Even exemplary, there's somebody you look up to. In Hebrew, the word for person, it's ish or isha, man or woman, but I've heard, at least in this book, okay, How to Be a Mensch and Not a Schmuck, by Michael Wax.
Right to the point.
Take a picture of this.
I would have thought a-hole.
I've got to take a picture of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but keeping with the, the Yiddish.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not, they're not opposite.
So, he speaks about somebody a person who's kosher. I've never heard that expression myself. Have you, Steve, somebody, a kosher person? Have you? Okay, I haven't. But I prefer the Hebrew term yashar, upright, someone with integrity, straight, that to me is a closer image to what we're talking about here. So Wax would, say, well, what is a mensch? Well, it's the opposite of a schmuck. If you want to know what the menschlichkeit thing is, and you don't know, well, think about what would a schmuck do, and then the opposite.
So you got the Yiddish version, and then second word comes from Yiddish, but it's English translated. Schmuck is, we use that all the time.
Right,
in
it's not
English.
become part of the English
First time I
language.
heard it on television,
I was a freshman in college, and I was at like good Catholic roommates Sunday dinner, and her brother said called somebody a schmuck, and I'm like, do you know what? Because
the Christians now.
they have the host shock, like, yeah, they just said schmuck.
It just made a jerk or something.
Exactly,
In the general population.
Exactly, not what our interpretation. I'll never forget that. So, yeah.
So, further, let's break this down. Okay, let's go back to Yiddish for a moment. So in Yiddish, they talk about having a Jewish heart and a Jewish mind, a Yiddish heart and a Yiddish cup, right? So, a related term to Yiddish cup is the term sechel. Now, has everybody heard sechel? Have you heard sechel?
Like
That was common
intelligence,
sense.
Yeah.
intelligence.
Sechel, you've heard that?
No, I
Stuart's
haven't.
heard that,
Yes.
sure, right?
Yeah.
So you've never heard of sechel? Okay,
Sexual is common sense.
yeah,
Common
except,
sense,
except that
okay.
I'm not sure there is any common sense anymore.
No.
I'm sure I think common sense died somewhere around.
Sort of like what we were talking
Well,
about.
yes, it died, it just wasn't given a formal sermon. But, how would you define, other than common sense, could you break down sechel into, what is it like to have sechel?
Well, I thought that sexual meant intellect, like it's, and not really necessarily common sense, like, common sense would be a little more wiser in a sense. Like sexual, I thought meant, more on the cerebral level, but I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, just in conversations, just, in.
So
the
there's a
class that I'm
difference,
listening to.
there's a difference between Yiddish and Hebrew.
Okay. And when they're
Right.
talking about, I mean, in the classes.
So in Hebrew, sechel is correctly,
Common sense.
no, in Hebrew, sechel is correctly translated as intellect or intelligence.
Okay, so that's how I learned.
Someone who is a maskil is somebody who is very knowledgeable.
This is modern Hebrew uses the expression sechel hayashar for common sense.
Okay, so.
Sechel hayashar.
What's hayashar mean?
Hayashar means to be upright.
You sure?
You're sorry, you're straight.
Is sekel the same as sayachel?
Yes,
Yeah.
It depends on how you,
right.
Yeah.
It depends on where your parents come.
right,
There
and-
is that word means.
but it's not common anymore.
No.
Common sense is not common anymore.
Right,
It's like, you have to, if you're willing to learn, you have to learn what common sense is. You have to learn values now. It's not, it's not given to you by your
and we'll
parents.
talk more about
Yeah,
that.
but
We'll
it's
talk
not
more
common
about
anymore. Yeah.
how are these values, how to be imparted, how is this to be learned? We'll talk about that because I think there's a need for it now, which speaks to where we are. I would define, I personally would define sechel as being smart about life, and compassionate about life, having judgment, and closer to what we now call emotional intelligence. I would say that, that these are all part of sechel. And in fact, there was an article, I think it was in the New York Times yesterday. It was an article that said emotional intelligence was more important. Did you see that? Emotional
Yeah, I think so.
intelligence was more important than,
IQ, straight IQ.
and I think that's true. It's more needed. Because there are a lot of brilliant people around who don't have sechel, unfortunately. And then the Jewish heart, I think we know probably it's a more common, having compassion, kindness, and a sensitivity that keeps one from being cruel. It's an anti-cruel kind of disposition. So, there are biblical basis for that, which we just heard that just how many partiot before about chewing the mother away from the eggs with 2 or 3 partial, that the idea is that you don't take the mother and the eggs, there are a couple of different reasons are given, but basically it's a compassion for the birds, and kashrut makes a point of trying to kill the animal in the least painful way. There's some debate about that now, but that certainly was the intent over the millennium. And then the very strict prohibition about shaming somebody in public. About that was considered to be akin to murder. That one, because blood, if you shame somebody, their face will flush. And it's akin to having like a blood, like murder, like blood. In fact, I don't know, one or more of the rabbis says that, it was better to throw oneself into a fiery furnace than to shame somebody in public. And that's a pretty strong statement, because there are other cultures where shame, public shame is very much a part. And we all know the Scarlet Letter, you know, that this was not an uncommon thing, you know.
Stockades,
Huh?
stockades, using shame to correct
Stockade,
the.
yeah.
behavior.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, there's lots of things. So, you know, I'm not trying to be comprehensive tonight. I'm just trying to throw out a sketch. And there's an aversion, I think, whether it's custom or whether it's specifically Talmudic, against hunting as a sport. You know, killing for other reasons than eating or getting the, you know, the hide for clothing. You know, that you don't destroy life unnecessarily, you know. So yeah. So that's all part of that aspect of Menschlichkeit. And then there's another aspect of not separating yourself from the community, right? And that's, I believe that's in the Turkey abode, very specifically. Somebody coming in?
Alan,
Yeah.
A strange man.
Okay. Come on in, Alan.
Thanks. Leave my shoes on, it's okay.
So
Yeah.
we're talking here about different aspects of Menschlichkeit, what it is to be a Mensch, okay? And we talked about not separating yourself from the community, which is actually part of the Mishnah, part of the Perkei Avot. And Michael
question.
Wex,
I have a question about that.
yes, yes, ma'am.
I just want to
Miss-
make sure I
ma'am.
understand.
Yes.
Sarah? So it's, I don't know if the word could be forbidden, it's cautioned against or recommended that you don't separate yourself from the community.
Yes,
But it's also a threat to be kicked out of the community if you do
yes,
bad things, so it's,
fully.
so. Say more, could you say the sentence or something about don't separate yourself from community?
That's what I understand.
That's all it is,
That's
that's
what
it.
the sentence I
Yeah.
understand. I think that was the way it was phrased.
Okay, I'll look it up. I'm
Yeah, it's
curious
in the
to know
Perkei
more
Avot.
about
Yeah, it's in the Perkei
it.
Avot. So, so according to Michael Wex, who is, by the way, probably look, you know, well, he's one of the few, I guess, people who write about Yiddish and you know, in a kind of English popular style, and he's interesting. You know, he comes from both a religious background, but he also has a secular background. So he's one of the few people who do that, and his big first book was Born to Fetch, right?
I
That
think
was
I've
his,
heard of that. I've heard of that.
yeah, that was his best-selling book. So he said that even in the smallest community, you'd find most, if not all, of the following: a bikur cholim, visiting and providing necessities for the sick; haknosis kaleh, right, kala for the bride, but kala, sure. Wedding clothes and provisions for indigent brides; a chavra kadisha for funeral and burial society; a haknosis orchim, a hostel for travelers with no money, for an inn. This is generally a bench in the study house. It's not Motel 6, but that's okay.
It depends on the study.
Yeah.
Is it a manger? Is it a manger maybe?
Huh?
Forget, is it a manger maybe?
Majors are
No,
little.
no.
I'm counting.
Somebody's passing through and it's a shtetl, so there's no end, right? Where they're gonna sleep. The basement,
Oh, okay. I mean, the
basement, or
synagogue?
the study.
The study.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. So there's also Mois Hittid, Passover fruit for those who can't afford it. Gemilas Hasidim Free Loan Society, which believe there's one in Baltimore, at least there used to be.
Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a Talmud Torah, the free Hebrew school for children whose parents can't afford it. A Malbish Aramim, free clothing for the indigent. A base Yosevim orphanage. A Hekdesh, a poorhouse, and a Moshe Zikdim. Zikdim?
Zignim, it's a poor old person's house.
Yeah, for a whole thing. So, even, back in the, 18th, 19th century, all these Jewish communities had this for Jews now, specifically. But all of these communities, which meant obviously, if you have these things, that people have to be involved in them. I mean, right? We know that if you have committees, you got to have involvement. So you really had to be part of the community because to provide these things. All right.
Amazing. I mean, juxtaposition like workhouse or something like that. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And
right.
like what the history and the stories that I've read about, that all this was going on simultaneously in Jewish communities.
Right. I don't think
Just
there was
so
anything
compassionate.
like Dickens's poorhouse or whatever.
Oh, yeah, there was. My grandmother who lived with us
Uh-huh.
always told me stories about their greatest fears was that they were gonna end up in the poorhouse.
Oh, really?
She would
Okay.
say, So got the pitten.
Mm.
What
Oh,
country
okay.
was that, Jackie?
She was here in the
Oh,
United States.
you mean we're a
But
poorhouse
they
here,
came from the Ukraine
right, but
and-
they came here and,
and they came here and they didn't speak English, they didn't,
Right.
nothing. So they always worried, that they would end up in the poorhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other.
And then when I went to social work school, they taught us about the poorhouses.
We had poorhouses here.
In
I mean, I
history,
just know
you
about
said
like
that.
In America,
The thing that you have to remember, though, is that Jewish communities were very insular because, in large part, the Christian community did not want us. So we had to be insular.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to
Including
provide all
Baltimore.
of this for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Orthodox community here, we have just about all of those things.
All of those
Yeah, they
things
don't want
have
us
to be
either.
part of the Orthodox community.
Because it's insular.
You can't have an Orthodox community without having all those institutions. It wouldn't be Orthodox.
why? Because that's just part of their culture?
It's part of the culture.
Yeah, the first thing that any group did when they came to the United States is they set up a cemetery and they set up a synagogue. And
They
then
set up, I'm
a
sorry.
synagogue, but the cemetery came first,
Mhm,
and then everything else grew from that.
mhm.
And when you look at the Associated Jewish Community Federation and all of the agencies
Mhm.
of the Associated, that's really how the Associated is organized.
Mhm.
So there's an agency for housing, there's an agency if you need money, there's an
Mhm.
agency if you like all.
And I used them for job counseling,
Yeah.
and for resume writing and so forth. I did. Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but the general community probably didn't provide, poor expectant rides.
No.
There are a lot of these things that are very specifically Jewish.
Well, they
Yeah.
come directly from the Talmud. Right? I mean, the Talmud says that if you don't have X, you don't have a Jewish community,
Mm,
right? And they go through. Well, can you have a Jewish community if you don't have a way to provide a bride price for
Mhm.
indigent brides,
mhm,
right? And they go through and they're, oh, no, you have to have that, right?
Mhm.
And it goes through and lists all of these
Mhm.
institutions.
mhm,
So how can, if you have a community
mhm,
and the rabbi is a rabbi because they know the Talmud,
mhm. Which of course they did, right?
right?
Yeah. mhm,
So that's what you're gonna get.
mhm, mhm. Okay.
I'll be right back, let something might come.
I just have a few more points and then I want to ask the question and then we'll just open it up and just have a general discussion. So part of it was a wonderful book that I read. I don't know, maybe late in high school, maybe early in college, Life is with People. You familiar with that book, Steve?
I don't know it.
It's a wonderful book, and it is an interesting story, but it basically is like an anthropological study of the shtetl. This is, and so it goes into great detail. It might be a bit idealistic, I understand, but it was basically, it's very, I thought it was a terrific book. And I think the people who did Fiddler on the Roof borrowed from that in developing that. So there was a philosophy of Yiddishkeit as Menschlichkeit. Okay. So in other words, there was not a difference, but there was no space between being a religious person and being a mensch. This was part and part, they were part and parcel of each other. And there's a wonderful story, and if you haven't read it, it's very short and it's very well written by the man who was considered like the dean of Yiddish literature, I.L. Peretz, called, well, there's a couple of different translations, If Not Higher. You familiar with that? Yeah. It's a wonderful story, and you just try to summarize it, but I'm not going to do it justice. You just have to read it. It's so short and beautiful. Anyway, it's a time for penitential prayers, and this person called the Litvak comes into town on a Litvak. My father's family were Litvaks.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and they were people who studied at the yeshivot, and they were into Talmud, and more Talmud, and maybe Mishnah, maybe.
Well, you can't have one without the other, but okay.
Yeah. So, and so he goes into this town, and it's the town of Nemirov. And there's a Rebbe there, very often named for the town, so the Nemirov Rebbe, And
You have to stop.
yes, sir.
So Rebbe is Hasidism.
Right,
Litvak is not Hasidism.
right.
At the time that this was written, there was a huge animosity between the Litvak community and the Hasidic
Right.
community.
I'm sorry, what is Litvak?
Litvak is somebody who emphasizes study over everything else.
I thought Litvak was somebody from Lithuania.
That's what I
That's true.
thought. Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's true. So what happened is, it's kind of like this. So, somebody who is very punctilious, they're very careful and exacting, and everything has to go exactly according to order. What do we call them in Yiddish? A yeka.
Yes.
A what?
A yeka.
A yeka?
And what's a yeka?
I don't know, I never heard that.
Yeka is an Ashkenazi Jew,
Ah, yeah.
but particularly an Ashkenazi Jew from Germany.
Germany,
Yes.
like my parents, like my mother.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Most of them.
so it had-
Right, well,
so the notion is, right, what country where do all of us is run on time, right? So, so in that same way, right, that we take this human attribute of being very exacting and call it by a place, right? Same thing for Litvak, right?
That makes
Well,
sense.
one
That
group,
makes sense.
one group very much valued correctness, halakha, all the rules,
Absolute
regulations.
halakha and
Hasidic-
regulations, right?
And the Hasidic was more like the heart, the more you feel,
Right.
the more you feel at oneness,
Mhm.
that is what counts. And so these two groups were like,
Yeah,
nah,
actually,
no, not really.
actually, some of the Litvak, actually called the police, they actually called the police to imprison.
Hasidim.
And I think one of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe was
Right.
imprisoned, right?
Because they were too joyous, basically.
Well,
Not serious
they
enough?
considered them kind of like enemies. I mean, the Litvak considered the Hasidic as Hasids enemies.
Because they were outgoing and
Because they didn't follow halakha exactly the way you're supposed to do halakha. And, I mean,
Yeah, but
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Don't the Hasidim also study their, what, all?
at this time, there were all kinds of different Hasidim.
Okay.
Right? And so there would be there were courts where the Rebbe really emphasized learning Talmud, but learning Talmud in a particular way, not the same way as you would in a literature yeshiva. And then there were other Rebbe's who would say, the most important thing is to serve God with joy. Right? And how do you, and so those Hasidim, they'd have to be joyous. So they'd come out of shul and they'd turn somersaults and do handstands. And the literatures would look at them and go, what kind of crazy stuff is this? Right? So it's complex.
So
I
anyway,
have two points I can add, 2 points to this. We read a story under Gail Lipsish about a Litvak, and he was converted to Hasidism. He came from it's cold up there in Lithuania. And by the way, the concordance and Bibles are printed up there. That's their specialty. So maybe that has something to do with reading and studying. You mentioned. And in this story, the rabbi loved to sneak off and stick his head practically in a fire to get really, really warm, because it was sort of a symbolic story about how a Litvak became converted to Hasidism because he loved to get warm. How about that?
That was a literature and lunch story
Yeah.
you guys studied.
Yeah,
That's fine.
this is somewhat similar, Mark. Anyway, so the Litvak comes in town and it's in the morning service, the Shacharit service during the penitential prayers, and they can't find the Rebbe. Nobody can find the Rebbe, So the Litvak, who's already a little bit, suspicious about this whole deal, right? Coming from his standpoint, what's with these people, right? So he decides that he's going to hide under the bed of the Rebbe to see what is going on here, right? So, I'm sorry.
Is this a folk tale or?
Well, I didn't hear you.
I forgot.
Yeah. So anyway, so he hides under the bed, and early in the morning, the Rebbe gets up. He puts on a peasant's clothes. He takes up an axe, and he goes into the forest, and he chops down some trees. He chops down so he has some lumber, some firewood. He goes to this sick widow's house, and he, with the wood, and she says, "Well, I can't pay you." And he says, "Oh, that's okay. Goes, said, we'll put it on credit, you'll pay me." And she says, "Well, how do you know?" He says, "Well, I have faith. I have faith. You're gonna have faith." So, he goes back and he changes back into his regular clothes, and then he starts to say the penitential prayers. So it's like, and he does this every day, because the woman needs firewood, right? But he doesn't want to embarrass her, right? So he's doing this little number here to avoid her feeling it's charity, right? In that kind of sense, so he wants to respect her dignity. So anyway, to make a long story short, the Litvak becomes the Nemerover's Chassid, similar to your story, Mark. And then during the 10 holy days, the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the people in the in the shores, they're again wondering where the Rebbe is, and they say, well, maybe he's flying in, his soul is flying into heaven. And, and then the former Litvak says to himself, if not higher.
Hmm.
Like
going to God.
right, if not higher.
Mm.
So it just, I think, just a really beautiful way of showing how these two things were not divided there between, quote unquote piety, being a pious person and being a highly ethical, highly conscientious person. Okay.
7:45.
Huh?
It's
7:45. Very good. Just to have a couple of things. I think when we're talking about a mensch, we're talking about a whole packet, a whole package. It's the whole person. And what I say is like you know when you see him or her or they or whatever. It's like, at least that's my experience. You say, boy, what a mensch. It's like a gut level. It's like it goes beyond even the intellect. You're struck by that.
It's character.
It's a character, right? And you're struck by
charisma.
right. Your character.
No, I'm saying I'm saying in terms of feeling like someone has charisma.
But a Mensch doesn't have charisma.
I know, Judy, take it literally.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, but it's a gut feeling.
Right.
Yeah. And they may or may not have charisma, but
Right.
they certainly have a
I
feeling.
don't know if I agree with that.
Okay, we're opening up. It's open discussion.
Well,
Let's go for it.
I think I have an orientation because of my work that has shown me that people can pretend to be Mensch-like, charismatic, kind, generous, friendly, and not be at all.
The veneer sort of surface.
Not a veneer, a facade.
Okay.
A persona for purpose, a purposeful persona that isn't authentic.
Person is a manipulator.
Right.
I've seen it.
Some people call the false self. The false self.
False self.
But I think I sit in a unusual position, because of my work. So it leaves me suspicious, leaves me questioning people a lot.
Yeah, well, we need discernment, to be able to see through it, but it's not always possible, especially if the person is very gifted with charisma.
Yeah.
It can be difficult.
So I'm just saying, that you can feel it. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that.
So, but what, over a period of time though, you
Observe it.
you get clear about what's really going on, right?
Well, like I could give you an example. There's somebody who, there have been articles in the Jewish Times about this person and about what a great person
Mhm.
and, all the good deeds that he does for people. And, but I work where we get phone calls about how that person is not that. So I don't know.
Well, it's like many public figures can come across a certain way, and then you find out that they're. I'll give an example, maybe an example of John Edwards. Remember when he was a senator and ran for president? He seemed like a really good guy. Then you find out how he treated his wife when she had cancer, and he had $500 haircut. He certainly wasn't. I don't know if I would have ever called him a man, but people in public have a good way, have a way often to get where they were, they hide a lot.
I think that human beings
I
are,
mean, yeah,
oh, sorry, were
I'm
you
sorry.
finished?
I was just gonna say,
I'm sorry.
I don't know, I think, I like to talk about menschness as, or Menschlichkeit as being something very positive and maybe not get caught up in people. I'm not saying criticize you all that, and your point is very valid, but to talk more about people, you know, who would we, I don't know, who would we consider Mensch? Martin Luther King, he certainly was flawed, but I would consider him a Mensch.
I was just gonna say, I mean, we're mixed bags, you know,
Mm.
there's no, and we have these ideals. And it sounds like, you know, in the process of like building our temple, like detail by, you know, healing and growing and striving and learning, you know, we become hopefully more like that. And how would you differentiate, if you would, a Mensch, you know, what we think of as a Mensch from a tzaddik? I mean, that's, you know, that's
From a what?
also our
Tzaddik?
tzaddik, our ideal of, you know, becoming ever more pure and ever more a vessel for God. You know,
Well, I
you
think,
describe it like that.
in the Tanya, doesn't that go into that, there's some, what it is?
Well, I mean, a little bit, you know, I mean, it goes into it from the notion that who can be a tzaddik?
Who can be what, I'm sorry?
Who can be a tzaddik? You know, if you set tzaddik as your goal, then you're bound to be disappointed.
Hmm.
Right?
Part of my ignorance, does Sadiq refer more
Tzaddik
to
is somebody who is saintly.
saintly? Okay, so it's kind of like Mensch, but a little different.
It's much more than that.
Yeah.
Tzaddik technically is somebody who connects with every soul.
Hmm. Wow,
With
Maybe
every
like
absurd,
Soul.
every soul.
like the Dalai
Right.
Lama.
Like the Dalai Lama is a tzaddik.
Okay.
Many people would have said that Menachem Mendel was a tzaddik, and his predecessor,
Sorry, Menachem Mendel,
Yaakov Yosef.
Is
What?
Menachem, is that
Menachem Mendel was the last Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Schneerson?
Yeah.
Okay,
And he would be described as a tzaddik, and perfect in every way.
Absolutely.
But more than perfect in every way is the ability to connect with each and every soul at that soul's place. Right? That's the notion of it.
Now, this is a loaded question, Steve, but I'm gonna ask it, if you don't want to answer it, that's right. Do you feel like Zalman was a tzaddik?
Someone I think was a tzaddik, yeah. I mean, I've been blessed to know several people that I think are tzaddikim. They're not perfect, but they have the ability to connect with each and every soul.
That's that emotional intelligence that you were talking
It
about.
could be emotional intelligence. I think it may be more. It's,
Yeah, along with holy emotional.
It's like an elevated soul who is operating on multiple levels at the same time, I think.
yeah.
I guess my point was that, we put people on pedestals or we have expectations. And when we see their humanity,
Mm.
then we get so enraged, but we are all that.
But we
that
have to
makes-
realize that we are human. We are
Yeah.
all human. We all have faults.
Mhm.
And that's why if people come out and say, yes, I made a mistake, please forgive me. I'm not covering it up, right?
Yeah,
That's-
yeah.
We are a forgiving group of people. We are forgiving humans,
Mhm.
so.
I mean, my sense, Mark, you've got your hand raised.
Thanks. So, Mensch. So, here's a clarifying question I'd like to ask. There's two things. Is it true what you're saying? There's two things. One is our feeling, what a Mensch, and what that person, what we see that person is, what a person appears to be. Is it someone, clarifying question, is it someone who unusually fulfills the rules of the Talmud?
Mm.
No, I don't think so. I mean, my impression of a mensch, when I think of a mensch, is someone who is first and foremost kind.
Yeah.
You leave Judaism out of it. They
Yeah,
don't
above,
have to be religious.
above,
or anything.
above everything else,
Kindness.
above everything else, they're kind.
Thoughtful.
Empathetic.
It doesn't,
Consider,
Considerate.
right? But all of those fall under this, I think, a rubric of kindness, right? But it's,
Awareness of others.
you
too.
know, I mean, like, so
Empathy.
Linda
Empathetic.
gave an
Even though-
example last week. She was at the store and the person in front of her didn't have enough money to pay for their groceries. And Linda's first instinct was to say, I'll pay for it, right? But the woman had already left the store,
And the man behind me said the same thing. He said, I'm on food stamps, but I can pay for it.
Oh,
right?
It
wow.
was $9.
That's being a mensch. Right? It's just consideration and kindness. You know, and we can be flawed and still have consideration and kindness because that's going to overcome our other flaws, I think. I think that, and that's why authentically you can sense, right? What a mensch is, because you can see all of the ways that they're being kind.
Yeah,
Kind of like basic goodness. I mean, you know, at a very basic level, they're good. And how they treat others.
It's like right in the trenches, not some lofty,
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
holy person on a
Yeah.
mountain. It's like right there. And,
Yeah.
In daily life.
And volunteering at soup kitchens and things
Oh,
like
that's
day to
just-
day stuff in the supermarket, paying for somebody.
A mensch is someone who does good stuff when nobody's looking.
That's it.
exactly.
Okay.
That's it.
But, you know,
And I
it's
think that's the difference.
Kindness is a
between the
language that
person who puts on the
everyone can
facade
hear, even the deaf,
and the real person.
Wow.
I said-
right?
That's-
Kindness
Say
is
it again?
kindness is a language that everyone can hear, even the deaf.
At the high holidays, I said.
And everyone, kindness is something that everyone can see, even the blind. Right. You don't have to be spiritual, you know,
Right,
you don't
right,
always
right.
have to be
It's part of-
holy
yeah.
and all the time.
And sometimes there are people who are very, very, very religious, they identify themselves as utterly connected to Hashem, you know, and they do as many mitzvot as they possibly can, you know, they have 100 blessings every day, and they are not mentioned.
That's correct. They're wannabes.
Well, but
Well, it's just the more perfect you are, sometimes you fall into the trap of being judgmental, because it's like you're so
Well, being
correct.
what, I'm sorry.
And then it's when somebody
Judgmental.
you're
Judgmental,
you
oh, right, right,
follow, some the person you see isn't doing it as much, you're like, what's wrong with them? You know, that's a vulnerability. in being so perfect. I mean,
it's
Yeah.
how you look at it, but
it's
when I start,
hard. Every way of being has its own.
what I said at the high holidays is to, you know, bring it back to Reconstructionism. To be as God would have us act, isn't that kind of basic thing of to follow the moral code? You know, a lot of the commandments dictate that we be menschlich, you know, being kind to animals. To just I look at Judaism as kind of a way to be a mensch. If you follow the
That's what
you know, to be kind to animals, to be kind to children, to all of those things that comprise the Jewish community. That's all about being a mensch. So to me,
But you
Judaism.
can still be a mensch and not be Jewish.
Exactly. You can, but Judaism
resurrection,
helps us
resurrection
teach
both.
us how my point is, the components of Judaism
Yeah.
teach us all of the components. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. I mean, I have friends who are born again Christians,
Mhm.
and I consider them mentioned. But Judaism, at least from my point of view, they teach us, consider the sick, consider, you know, that whole, all those things that makes a Jewish community is all part of being menschlich. So if we do that, we're encouraging ourselves to do this. And it's like the
understand what
religion
you're
has taught
saying.
that. It's
Well,
just-
again, you take a look at all of the institutions that Rick was naming. All of them are intended to do what's kind,
exactly.
right?
The question, the Hillel's famous, the essence of the Torah while standing on one foot. What do not do unto others what would be hateful to you.
Right.
That kind of a very low baseline for Mentionists.
I would say that's a very low
Okay.
baseline. So, I think a better way of saying it is from Micah. Right? Love justice. Do justice. Love kindness. And be humble.
And what?
Be humble.
Micah was when,
Micah was
Prophet.
the last prophet.
okay. Can you repeat that just for the heck of it, please?
Do justice.
Yeah.
Love mercy. Be humble.
That's just as well, come
Humbly
with
with
your
your
God.
Be humble.
So I'm just gonna stop for just a second and just turn, because we don't have a lot of time. Officially, we're going to go over that line with me. So the question is this. There aren't, as far as I see, publicly, many people that I would identify as mentioned. If anything, there are a lot of people out there that would be considered schmucks, if not worse, if not lower, instead of not higher.
Higher,
If
but
not,
lower.
if not lower. So we want to pass this on to the next generation, and Steve and Emily are working with the intergenerational program. How do you pass on the values of Menschlichkeit?
Children learn what they've lived.
Yeah,
Let's see.
you gotta emulate. You gotta teach by doing.
And
It
it's
starts
like-
at home. It starts by, okay, this is how we are, this is how kind, and you don't say that word, but you just,
Be it.
you just
Yeah.
do, you be. You model.
But what if you don't have that? Then what do you do?
And you find
then
Because
maybe
I
you
guess, because my guess these days, there are a lot of people who don't have that.
Right, and I would say that's
have a lot
very
of gun
true.
violence.
We've talked about that,
We're
right?
talking about that.
Gun violence. Then you have to start looking inward and start thinking about the choices you make.
Well,
And do I want to have my children, my nephews, my nieces be like I am? Or I want them to be better? You have to start looking inward in that case, but no, it starts at home. It always starts at home.
So when we improve ourselves, we save the whole world.
What's that?
Say it again.
When we improve ourselves, we save an entire world.
Or a generation. We save an entire generation.
I think there are a lot of social programs now and have been probably forever to help children learn how to be their good selves when they don't have parents who are able to do that.
Everything we needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten.
What's that, Linda?
There's a book, everything,
I-
everything, something
Everything
like.
you need to know you learned in
Wasn't that kind of also tongue in cheek?
No.
Unitarian minister.
Like when you
Well-
coordinator, community walk across the street, but there were different things listed, like in the things that they learned in kindergarten that were the basic things of how to treat each other. So I can't remember it, but
They call it social, don't they call it social, or is it different? Social emotional learning, just the curriculum for that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that seems, I'm not exposed to it that much, but it seems, part of it's like stranger danger, so that's not really part of it. But a lot of it seems like social, like that's what that's
Absolutely.
teaching.
Frankly, I think it is not a matter of willpower to be good, but the essence of being good is learning techniques. Lots and lots of practical techniques of self-management.
That's a good
Mhm.
beginning, but it's like, like
Yeah.
what you said before about, as as each of us become a better person, then we actually have, a more holy impact. So we have to really go, to ourselves, heal ourselves.
Yes, we have a lot of things raging inside of us. Everyone does, and how to manage that. We can manage that poorly and blame others and things like that, or we can learn lots of techniques there to manage our own things that go inside of us that are causing us to act impulsively. Management of our own selves is the whole thing that makes us calm and deal with other people rationally and helpfully.
You know?
That's my thought.
Mark, that sounds, oh, I'm sorry, that sounds almost sort of formulaic. Like there has to be an essence beyond that. And I was thinking of, I'm sure you all know Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And I didn't realize, I came across it, I've been doing a lot of like self-learning on YouTube. The basis for that book is really character. And his point is that in the early days of the US, there was so much emphasis on more the character. I mean, there was bad character too, but on on character's foundation for goodness, I guess maybe even in like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, notwithstanding slavery and things like that. And I'm serious, but that since I don't know, maybe 1900 or something like that, he said there's been much more emphasis on appearance and sort of non-substance. So I think it's all being, I don't know what the connection exactly with Mensch is, but having good character has to be the basis for being a Mensch.
I think probably as you're learning behavioral external things and doing things correctly, has an impact, and at least keeps you from getting too off the deep end. And then slowly by slowly, I think as you repeatedly act appropriately, it does get inside. It's like that thing about hand to heart, heart to hand. I mean, both are true. And, you know.
Well, I just like to add something, for personal, well, after I graduated from social work school, I didn't get after I had one job, I guess it was considered a bit prestigious. So basically I was earning a living for most of mine, And, I worked in medical facilities, and some of the doctors would make jokes about social work or whatever like this, or wasn't always treated the best
Right.
in places. And, that, it was either 2 ways to go. Either become bitter, or you say, gee, when I have the chance, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to act the opposite way. So I've tried to do the latter, it's like, well, especially, when I'm dealing with people that quote unquote lower professions, quote unquote, aides or, whatever, grocery store, people are cashiers. I've been there, I know how it is to be not treated well. And so it's not like when I started out, it was very intellectual sense of what this was about, idea there. I was very idealistic and all this kind. But it is through life experience that I've learned what it is really to be considered, because the empathy is real. It's not fake, it's not, I'm not trying to think, gee, I want to be a good guy here. It's like, no, I know what this is like, and I have chosen to do it.
You learn what not to be.
I've learned what
Negative
not to be.
example.
Yeah,
Right.
Wow, that's so great. And
What not to be can be almost as important as what to be.
Exactly. And I had bad managers and terrible managers, and I said, well, gee, I'm going to learn from these people. I'm not going to do that.
that's the ideal thing. That's like perfect. You turned the curse into a blessing.
Right,
Instead of,
right.
like just thinking this
Right,
sour thing,
exactly.
you
I
got.
know now what it is to be a bad manager. Anytime I don't get to do that.
I have a question. What prompted you, what motivated you to want to talk about this topic?
Well, I guess this is, I feel rather strongly about it, because I think, well, I once said to, Jeff was teaching about, one of his courses. And I said, well, what about, Mensch, and I said, isn't that like the consensus from the most religious to the most secular to, and he said that consensus has broken down. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but
What a Mensch is?
well, that either that or what, or the idea is to be a Mensch, that that was just a position, and I felt like if we're really going to talk about what being Jewish is like, as opposed to like Judaism, which is pretty well spelled out, at least what it is to be a Jewish person. This is really the core. It's the core curriculum, and now there is something called Musar, where they actually work on various character traits, and so that's available to people. But it's like that's, I don't know whether everybody's going to go in for that, but the idea is that having that as I don't wake up and say, gee, I want to be observant. I want to observe all the mitzvot today. I want to observe all the time. I don't do that, although I do observe some mitzvot. It says what the implicit idea is. Today I want to be a mensch, and it's aspirational. You never got it. It's always, we talked about it a little bit, Alan. I don't think you've ever got. It's like this is the curriculum. This is what I'm aiming for. I can't, there's no way to be exotic. Forget that. That's no way. That's not it's not in the picture. But I can aim to be each and every day. I can aim for being a mensch. So I think it's foundational as we're reconstructing Judaism and reconstructing the Jewish. It's important. I think it's important to use that term. I really would like to hear it more, because I think
reconstructing?
No, it mentioned mental
Okay.
because I think even the term contains within it the core, I think, of what it is to be a Jewish person. Now, I mean, obviously there are non-Jewish people too, but this is the Jewish way to that.
Wow.
And that's what Judaism teaches us. That's what, like I was saying, taking care of all those elements. It's all about being a mensch. And I'm going to say, the school I work at, every week they check out a couple of kids who did something menschlich, and everybody announced it in front of everybody. It's like a week at the One. So they're trying to teach these kids, this is an example of being menschlich.
And they actually use that word?
Yeah, I
That's
forget,
great.
some kind of
She's in an
Mazel
Orthodox-
Mensch or meant, but
But
it's
it's Orthodox school, so they're going to use that.
Yeah.
right,
Well,
What's the name of the school?
Orthodox, that's where I work,
Orthodox.
Orthodox.
well,
It's
I
all
understand. I
discussion,
know.
kid, you know,
I,
yes.
I've understood, that mensch can mean human being, as opposed to animal. And it's like ability to love as opposed to lust, in the sense of caring for the other and the other's well-being, as opposed to what I can get from the other, and that's where the human being nature, the mensch nature is more developed than just the getting animal.
Well, we're in such an age, that actually we can learn from trees in a forest.
Oh, I know, that's.
About,
really-
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we're in such an age, and it's fine, that's wonderful, but they're probably closer to,
Yeah.
to what the way things should
Yeah,
be
yeah.
than, most of what we know in society. It's like, that's, in a way it's very good, in a way it's kind of like really sad.
Right.
We're learning from the trees, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
may it
many-
be so that we learn from.
I think many animals could be considered.
And the animals, elephants particularly, are
Yeah.
very,
Well,
Yeah.
very good dogs that are very loyal. My cats, I don't know if they're quite. Well, both of them, unless Frankie is going to steal my food. So about your idea of aspirational and menschness is like, you're never going to say, oh, I'm a menschness also seems to include a certain amount of modesty. Like, you're never going to, oh, I'm a mensch. Other people should consider you a mensch. It's like a way of being. And it's not something, oh, I'm a mensch, I don't have to keep doing this. It's something, it's just part of your being, right?
I would say
Right.
that would be my feeling,
Yeah.
you know. Mhm.
And I was just thinking the modesty sense of it, someone I think of this, did you ever, well, do you have to know who Jeff Singer is?
I'm sorry,
Jeff Singer, he's a professor at Maryland School of Social Work, he was one of the founders of Healthcare for the Homeless.
okay,
He is one of, I mean, he's one of the first people I considered consciously a mensch.
uh-huh.
Just so thoughtful, so
Mhm.
caring for people, self-sacrificing of himself,
Mhm.
and he exudes menshness.
Mhm.
And he has to be Jewish, but that doesn't really matter, he's not religious,
Mhm.
so it's a way, it's like, you kind of know, like you were saying, when someone's a mensch. I think it's,
Yeah, yeah, and again, and now that you use the term mensch, like a menschy person, so he doesn't have to be perfect and mensch all the time, but there's menschy, he's got a menschy, she's got a menschy or there.
what does that mean, they act?
Yeah,
like
I've heard
that?
that term, menschy.
Okay.
Mitch Lick, I've heard it.
Well, this is more.
No, it's Americanizing Yiddish.
Okay.
Oh,
A bunch you should go down, across the street and buy some apples.
wow,
Well, this is interesting.
This is good.
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Something else, I just realized that, so when we're kind to other people, like, it's great, and they seem to appreciate it, and they give us a warm feeling back. And so it's a lot of people are unhappily rude to other people, but those who know to be kind to others and all the great rewards that come back, emotional rewards. So I would like to couch this in the frame of this is a way to win at life.
To win, WIN,
Yes, at life.
okay. Yeah, well, I
You
would,
feel good, it's like.
yeah, I
it
would
feels
go
good
along
to-
with that, it's a winning way. Yeah, I think probably, you get some kind of a dopamine shot. You know, when you do something, yeah, you really,
Yeah.
I do probably.
It sounds like a bumper sticker.
Be a mensch.
It's the winning way.
It's,
But now you're competing.
Yeah, not the.
Now you're
like,
competing.
You know, it's like.
It's self-fulfilling.
You know what's right.
Well, it
because
depends on it,
it's the right
winning
thing to
has
do.
so many different connotations, right?
Exactly.
You can have a winning personality,
It's
it
not
doesn't mean
forced,
it's competitive.
it is.
You answer to yourself.
Yeah, you do it because you're supposed to do it. So,
If you know what you're supposed to do, like so many aimless people are just thinking, oh, you're supposed to love it, getting good or whatever the thing is, and it's a lot of confusion in our society.
I
Yeah,
couldn't hear-
the gentleman that was here, Tuesday,
Ali,
Ali, he talked about Sufism.
Yeah.
And, it's, again, it's very compatible. And it's a very compatible philosophy, it really is, to what we're talking about here.
Beautiful.
And you're talking about loving without expecting to get something in return, which is hard, but I think it is the way to go. But he talked about that, and being willing to sacrifice and so forth. I don't know if we talk that much about making sacrifice here in Judaism these days, do we? Haven't heard that term much.
I don't know that sacrifice is necessarily the goal so much as removing yourself from want.
From what, I'm sorry,
Want.
WANT?
Like the
That
emotional
sounds like
ones.
Buddhist.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, I'm sacrificing so much for that. It's not that connotation of sacrifice at all. It's stepping back from the greed and the consumerism and so it's not really sacrifice in that sense.
That which is material is just material.
Yeah, it's just stuff.
And when you step back, it's like you then and release, if you're not stepping back, you're seeing that as the end all to help your survival. It's like an idol. It's like when you step back, you see, oh, it's just stuff. It's not.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
it's
really
apparently
need to
good,
learn.
I think the Lord of the Rings. The people of the lottery, to me, the essence of that is the addictiveness of power. How, and how incredibly difficult, once you have power is, to give that up.
Hmm.
And I think, this is kind of a way of filling that void, to being a mensch or something like, well, that's an alternative to that, You don't have to have power over the people. You don't have to have, this is a different way to go.
And it's freeing. It's like you think that you have the power, but then whatever the it is.
Well,
is
you
controlling
are
You're
the
the fire,
slave of
yeah.
whatever that is.
Totally, yeah.
Right, you
So
are
the
that
mensch
slave.
As an,
is freedom.
can I say it as an, I know they don't want to keep, as an example, of course, he was a slaveholder and all kinds of other things, and but maybe womanizer, but George Washington, when he could become king, and when he turned that down, say, no, I'm stepping down from being commander of the army and resigning, my commission, and not trying to be president again, that he in a way laid the foundation for the republic, because there were people who, at that point, he could maybe have been crowned king.
I've heard George III said when he heard about that, he says, if that's real, he's the greatest man in the world.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
Who said that?
Hmm.
King George?
That's what I
Whatever
heard.
it was,
That's what
it
I,
was- it
that may
came
be
during the
apocryphal,
Revolution.
but that's what I heard.
Because just that someone could step away from that.
Right, to be able to have that
Right.
power within yourself. It's
To
like-
not take that power.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's what I heard. Anyway, it's a nice
Turned
thought.
out to be a really great
Whether it's
guy.
true or not.
Actually, George offered, King George of England, I believe it was, that's who the king was at the time, back in 17, whatever, offered George Washington a kingship. He did say no, that's in the history.
Wait, it's like king of the colony?
King of the colonies,
Holy,
and he did
shit.
say no. He said, we
I didn't
want our
know that.
freedom.
That's amazing.
I worked with a guy who was really into history.
Okay.
And he would tell, at lunchtime, we'd all get together and he'd tell another story. And he told us about George Washington turning down a kingship.
Was it even in, well, I'm really into history, I don't know if it was even in King George's power to offer him a kingship, but whatever, that's cool.
So there probably is some truth to.
Anyway, it's
I'll
a nice,
tell you,
it's a
I
nice story.
wanna,
Like, it's a good
have
mindset,
a
right?
conversation, have an
It's a good
opportunity to have
mindset.
a conversation.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
Sure, that was
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
My pleasure. I've been thinking about this for a long time, long time.
You're a man.
Or trying to be.
I think I'm Jackson.
Aspirationally.
I'm fine.
Huh?
Beach
Someone who wants to join the Nagoo group.
Who does?
I have got an email from someone.
Oh,
She saw it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great, yeah. Right, that's part of the ideal, is the open.
Should have been in the circle, but the weather didn't cooperate.
How did you get men?
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Rabbi Steve, for everything.